Good evening, everybody. This is Joe Corr, Superintendent, North County Central School District. It's great to be back with you on the second of our Parents Advisory Council community forums. The first one we had was last Thursday. We're scheduled for another one on Thursday night. Just a preview here, the vast majority of the content tonight is similar to the content that existed prior to that, but this is an opportunity for you, if you haven't seen it, to see it again. We have done, and I'll preview this up front, we have added some slides, some informational slides to health and safety, and we do have a schedule update. We've made a shift in the high school schedule to go to, instead of every 2 days on, 2 days off, going to every other day off. But it's the same concept, and we'll talk about that briefly. At the very end, if this is for your first time, we do have some new frequently asked questions. And if you really love this presentation and want to stay on, it is rather lengthy. I'll preview that, but we feel that it's comprehensive and there are a lot of information, and it gives you the information that you deserve. This second version of it will also be archived and recorded. So, we, want to make that known, and certainly you can tell your friends and neighbors that they can see these presentations, or fast forward to the end to see the newly archived material and the like. Again, I want to emphasize, we did make a change to the high school schedule, and I think this exemplifies the environment in which we now find ourselves. It is an environment that is ever changing. It is an environment that is formed by new data and facts, and when we get that, we adjust to it. And right now, we are awaiting on the results of our survey. We'll have a survey update tonight. We're also awaiting on the on our faculty to see their availability when it comes to accommodations related to COVID-19. And all of those will be determining factors in what we do. Please be rest assured that we are doing our very best to provide the safest program possible, the program also that is educationally sound and best meets the needs of our students. So without further ado, let's start the screen share right now. And so I just, again, so our agenda here. So just a brief note about the Parents Advisory Council. Parents Advisory Council has existed for a long time. And I'm in the 10 years I've served, this is my 11th year as superintendent. I've always had a Parents Advisory Council. Superintendents prior to me had that. So it's a major tradition of an organization of your friends and neighbors, community volunteers, from all levels and all schools who provide input on district operations and plans for the district. And the Parents Advisory Council has been working overtime since the month of June, especially helping to provide input on the reopening. So tonight's agenda is very similar to last week. We've just reversed the order a bit when it comes to covering the programs at our various schools. So we're going to start with Governor Cuomo's announcement, talk about health and safety. We're going to start with secondary 912, secondary 912 remote. We've made a change to the schedule there. Secondary 7 and 8, secondary 7-8 remotes, secondary 7-12 special areas. Then we'll do the elementary program K3, 4, 6, followed by special areas and remote. We will go to next steps and questions. There will be new questions. So we can go to the next slide here. And so questions, just to note here, questions, we will address additional questions that have been submitted by our community in advance of the meeting at the end of tonight's presentation. Any additional questions or unanswered questions that come in during the meeting will be addressed in subsequent meetings. And we have a frequently asked questions page on our district website. We archive questions and answers, and we are working to update that. So let's go to slide 4. So again, on Friday, August 7th, the governor announced that we had reached the metrics that were established to open schools. And so every region in the state met those metrics. All school districts in the regions of the state were authorized to open. The governor also spoke to the fact that his office and the Department of Health will be monitoring infection rates, and if there's a spike or a concerning metric, he will reevaluate. So if the infection rate goes above 5%, then he will reassess that decision and then reserve the right to close schools and remote learning. So we have an update on our survey results, okay? And so this is at the end of the day. And basically, if you take a look at it, we have 1,073 respondents at the elementary level. 77.9% are electing in person. I'm sorry, we have far more than that. We have about 1,400 responses. But of those, 1,073 are selecting in person. That's a total of 77.9%. 317 are selecting remote. That's a total of 22.1%. At 7 and 8, 320 families so far have selected in person. That's a rate of 80.6%. 77 are electing to go in remote. That is 19.4%. And 912, 719 have elected in person. 81.2 have decided that that's the percentage for in person. 166 or 18.8% have decided remote. So if we look at our totals in the district, 2,112 respondents, in person 79.9%, remote 560 or 20.1%. So really, since we administered the survey, it's quite amazing how it has stayed consistent right from the very early stages. We've had some iteration of 79%. It could be 79.4, 79.5, 6, 7, 8, and now it's 9, but that is where it has stayed. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at health and safety, and this is guidance based on New York State Department of Health recommendations, and that was done as of the 13th of July. So I think, the first slide here that we have is what can we learn from other schools? And so, I think this is an informative quote. Dr. Ranu Kaushal is the chair of the Department of Population Health Sciences and the Nat Laitman Distinguished Professor of Healthcare Policy and Research at Weill Cornell Medicine. He's the physician-in-chief of population health studies at New York Presbyterian Weill Cornell Medical Center. He states that school reopening decisions need to be informed by the current infection rate of the community. So let's take a look at what that is and what are the current infection rates. So we'll work backward from 812 at the bottom. So New York State had an infection rate of 0.84. And the Albany County had 1.1%. The rate, and you can see the numbers at the top of that out of the number tested. Okay, so the ratio is, so if you see in 813, if you see 727/85,455, that's the number of positive tests out of a total of over 85,000. That was a rate of 0.85% on 813. On 813 in Albany County, there were 1,173 tests administered. 3 were positive for a total of 0.25%. We move up to 814. The rate, and I won't read the numbers, was 0.83 for New York State, 0.37 for Albany County. On 815, 0.78% for New York State, and Albany County was 0.96%. On 8/16, New York State rate 0.71% and Albany County 0.43. So as the governor's pointed out, you can see the other graph there that's rather dramatic in terms of really flattening the curve in terms of total hospitalizations. We are at 534 hospitalizations. But if you take a look at it, the Albany County rate has been at or consistently below 1%. And if you take a look here for the last 5 days, the infection rate in New York State has been at less than 1%. So the results are very solid, very strong, and the best in the country. So when we take a look at, what are the best practices, and the source of this again is from the Weill Cornell .edu news, and these are the identified best practices. So if you can take a look at that, limiting the number of passengers on a school bus. So we are limiting that to 1 per seat with siblings allowed to sit together. We reconfigured the physical environment of the schools to allow the limited number of students per classroom with desks 6 feet apart. We are eating lunch not in cafeterias. There is no clustering for lunch. We are not having closed spaces like gyms and locker rooms unless students are socially distanced appropriate. In a gym, they are not in there. In a locker room, we are not using those. We are definitely prioritizing, while the weather's good, the use of outdoor space for physical education activities and other learning. We have changed our schedules around to promote physical distancing in our schools. We've moved students. We are mandating, not encouraging, mask wearing. We will have wipes, sanitizer. We are going to provide a lot of education, information, communication on the need for periodic hand washing. We're looking at how we clean and disinfect our facilities. And as you can see in our plan, there is a comprehensive plan to clean and disinfect our facilities at least once daily at our high school. That will occur twice. And again, throughout the day, high touch areas, door handles, light switches, other heavy touch areas will be wiped down. We've contracted, we've worked through New York State Energy Research and Development Authority to come up with a grant to work on improving our ventilation. And we are working cooperatively and collaboratively with Albany County. I'll be talking a bit about our meeting with Dr. Whalen, all Albany County superintendents, which is scheduled for Friday. So we are incorporating best practices into our safety plan.
Yes, Mr. Core, one of the things I wanted to point out is the reason that this slide says encourage mask wearing is these are not our practices. These are the best practices as said by Cornell. I think it's interesting to use this as a checklist and realize that of all of the things that are on the Cornell best practices list, we already had those as part of our plan.
And so as you can see, we are guided by science, we are guided by significant research. And if this is the checklist suggested by Cornell Medical, we have incorporated it. Science Magazine has chronicled, and when we put the presentation up, you certainly can click on these links here. But some success stories. Early June, 20 other countries had reopened schools. Denmark case rec numbers continued to decline after daycare centers and elementary schools were open on the 15th. Middle and high followed in May. Netherlands cases stayed flat and then dropped after elementary schools opened part-time on May 11th and high schools opened on June 2nd. And in Finland, Belgium, and Austria, there was reported no evidence after the schools reopened.
And we were talking about the fact that these nations all had a very low positivity rate compared to the rate in the United States, but their rate is comparable to our rate here in New York State. And that's why the metric is so important to look at our New York State metrics. And so when we think of what we're hearing on the national news, we're also seeing a lot of cases where they're not using best practices. We're seeing college kids getting together in dorms at big parties. We know that's not good practice. We've all seen the video coming out of Georgia with thousands of kids in their high school. We're not doing that. We're socially distancing and bringing in half our student body. They're not wearing masks, making it mandatory. We're making it mandatory. So there's a lot on the news that kind of looks at the nation's schools as a whole, but New York State, and hence the reason for the slide on the metrics, is in a different position.
So I'll now turn the presentation over to Ms. Jenna Bongermino. Ms. Bongermino is our Director of Human Resources and our COVID coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I am the COVID coordinator for the district, and to talk about our cleaning protocols, we've been working very closely with our Director of Custodial Services, Mark Wiegert, and he's been working with his staff to develop the cleaning and disinfecting procedures and schedules at all schools to ensure that they follow the CDC and the Department of Health guidelines. He's been working very hard to ensure that they've all been trained on the proper cleaning and disinfecting procedures, and is really ensuring that everything is disinfected and cleaned every day. We understand that the disinfecting is going to be the #1 line of defense, and his staff are willing and able to do the work that needs to be done. We will be keeping a cleaning and sanitation log at every building, which will be maintained by the district, by the daily custodian, to ensure that all of the facilities are being cleaned and disinfected as appropriate. And we're also putting disposable wipes and approved cleaners in all different areas so that faculty and staff, if they need to use them, will be able to have that right at their hands so that they could take care of whatever wiping down that they need to do.
Ventilation is an area of concern in all buildings, and we are working to improve that and address it. So according to New York State education law, outside air, it's a requirement that outside air shall be supplied at all times to occupied spaces in accordance with the current air conditioning, heating and cooling standards, heating, cooling, and ventilation standards. So the current requirement is to supply 10% outside air at all times. And we use an energy recovery unit on the roof, so individuals in the room will not see the process. It won't be visible to them. But through our work at improving the efficiency of our system, we've increased the outside air percentage to 20%. So we've exceeded that requirement. We are working with a grant from NYSERDA and with Guth DeConzo engineers. And we are conducting an entire school-by-school analysis on COVID and safe indoor air quality improvements. We'll have the full analysis available this month. We will be installing MERV 13 filters. They have been ordered and they are scheduled to come into us in late September. So those will be installed to combat COVID-19 virus transmission. Ms. Bongermino.
Thank you. So one of the ways that we're going to really try to ensure that everyone walking into the building is healthy is to have both staff and students do a daily attestation and a temperature screening prior to coming to school. So we have come up with an app that we have decided to purchase that will be rolled out to all district employees and students, where parents and staff can then answer attestation questions prior to the child or the student or the staff coming into school, indicating whether or not they have any COVID-like symptoms, whether or not they've been exposed, and whether or not they've had a fever of 100.0 or higher. If the fever is 100.0 or higher, then you're directed to stay home. Otherwise, they can come to school. And we're really working on what this is going to look like, how we're going to roll it out, and what the training is going to be for all students and staff so that everyone is able to do this prior to coming to school.
In the event that a student forgets to, or the family gets busy in the morning, as we all do, and suddenly the child shows up and we have a record of who has done the attestation, we will have that child go to the nurse's office just to have their temperature checked. If they do have, again, a fever of 100 degrees or higher, they will have to stay in the nurse's office in a dedicated area prior to going home. So we do have a second checkpoint in case a family simply forgets to fill it out in the morning.
We have, as a district, purchased a ton of PPE. We've got a lot of stuff on order, and a lot of items have come in as well. So we've ordered disposable masks for both students and staff. As you can see, 76,000 disposable child masks have been ordered. 324,000 disposable adult masks have been ordered, and we do have 8,200 in stock. We also did a large order of N95 masks, which are going to be for our custodial staff, nursing, special ed, and then those employees that feel that they need it due to maybe a medical concern. We do have 2,000 in stock, and we've ordered 7,000 more. We also have face shields, gowns, gloves, and then hand sanitizer, dispenser stations, disinfecting spray, paper towels, and dispensers in all of the bathrooms. We did remove shut off all of the air hand dryers in the bathrooms so that none of the airborne infection might spread, and using paper towels and dispensers. So there's a lot of PPE that will be available for employees and for students if necessary.
So I think when we take a look at health and safety, I think, these are also some of the, foundational measures that need to be incorporated. And of course, social distancing is requisite. So we are abiding by 6 feet of social distancing in all classrooms and in common spaces. There will be lots of signage to remind people of that. That's an important part of the communication plan. We're looking at approximately 15 students in a typical classroom space. As I mentioned earlier, busing is 1 student per seat, 2 if we have siblings, approximately 50% capacity of the bus. We are not recommending, we are requiring face coverings for all adults and students at all times. We will provide training on the proper use of such. We will provide mask breaks throughout the day, where students, maybe actually a fun game or an opportunity to break to stand more than 6 feet apart in a classroom and remove the mask, which of course will be removed for eating. With students with a medical exemption, to wear a mask will be required to do one of the following: to provide documentation from a physician or a healthcare provider, work through the Committee on Special Education or the 504 process, or engage in a consultation with one of our 2 school physicians and the building administrator. We are going to enforce the wearing of masks. So students who refuse to do so will be in violation of our code of conduct. That will be considered to be insubordination, and appropriate disciplinary procedures will follow. So the protocols for testing and tracing. And so you see the part in blue there, that is an update. So essentially, once we're notified of a COVID-19 case within the district, Ms. Bongermino will immediately contact the Albany County Department of Health. We will be sharing the information that we have about the case. We will then work collaboratively in conjunction with the Department of Health in Albany County The county will begin its investigation. They will work with us to begin the contact tracing process. We will provide them with all the contacts. Contacts have been defined as those who were in close contact with the individual for a minimum of 15 minutes. And that's the information that we will provide. That is the information the county requests to begin the contact tracing identification. Then the trained contact tracers from Albany County will get in touch with identified contacts. They will be advised of the COVID testing requirements, where to go, what time, and so on. We will send out a communication respecting the privacy of the individual, but we will send out communication to the district about a COVID-19 positive case, give the date, location. Again, individual privacy and names will be protected. And any decision regarding building or district closure will be made upon recommendation of the Albany County Department of Health. And has been mentioned previously, we'll be meeting with the Albany County Health Director, Dr. Elizabeth Whalen, on Friday, and that meeting will occur at 1 o'clock. And we includes all the superintendents of public schools in Albany County. We're also working to bring in the private schools as well. At that time, we will review, analyze, and revise testing and tracing protocols if needed. We will be following Dr. Whalen's recommendation. If there is any change, substantial change that results from that, we will notify the community on that and update them accordingly. And again, as you can see, there's another segment in blue here for the protocols for testing and tracing. So any individuals who are contacted by the County Department of Health for COVID-19 testing, so if you're identified as a contact, you are also going to be required to quarantine for 2 weeks, even if your test comes back negative. If you're an individual who is concerned, but you are not symptomatic, and you're not identified as a direct contact, but you want to get a test, you do not have to quarantine while awaiting results. And individuals who are symptomatic, so you're feverish and you demonstrate all of the classic COVID-19 symptoms, and you do get a test, you need to quarantine until those test results come back. And again, any individual, whether that's a student or an employee who tests positive, must quarantine until released from the New York State Department of Health. So again, you'll see us repeat this again. The first day of school is Monday, September 14th. We're using our 4 professional development days up front, similar to what we did this year with construction. So first day of school, Monday, September 14th. And I will now turn this over to Ms. Skeels, who will be talking about the educational plan and reviewing the school schedules here.
So when we begin on Monday, September 14th, we're excited. We can't wait to greet our students. So our students from Fortsbury and Southgate will now be considered the students who are from the early school. So our K-3 students will be starting their school day at 8:45 and ending their school day at 2:15, and that's at Fortsbury and Southgate. So the buses will drop off the students in K-3 from those neighborhoods at their respective buildings, and then move on to the junior high with the 4th through 6th grade students, who will be starting their day approximately 9 o'clock and ending at 2 o'clock. At the end of the day, the buses will go in reverse order. They'll pick up the 4th through 6th graders from the junior high first, then go to the elementary buildings, because that makes sense, because now they're getting back into those elementary neighborhoods to then do the drop-offs. Our other 4 elementary schools, Blue Creek, Bout Hills, Latham Ridge, and Loudonville, will now become our late schools. So K-3, their day will start at 9:45 and go till 3:15. So they're running an hour behind the other 2. Same thing, the buses will drop off at the elementary buildings for the K-3 students first, Then they'll travel to the junior high school to drop off their 4th through 6th grade peers, and they'll be running approximately 10 to 3. Same thing in the afternoon. They'll pick up first at the junior high and then move from the junior high back to the elementary buildings and then right out into those elementary neighborhoods. Our junior high school students and our high school students are going to be sharing a space, but not at the same time. They'll be at grades 7 and 8 will go to school in the morning. They will go from 7:30 to 11 o'clock in the morning. There'll be a break in the middle of the day for them to get home, have lunch, and then they will have virtual classes in the afternoon that go from 12:40 to 2:35. Their high school peers in grades 9 through 12 will have just the opposite. They'll be in virtual classes in the morning from 8:30 to 10:45. Then they'll have travel time and their school day will run from approximately 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. We have to separate them out. Obviously, between the 7th and 8th graders and the 9th through 12th graders, we have 3,000 students. We can't put them all in the same building. We can't even put all 2,000 in the same building. In order to observe socially distant guidelines, we had to split them up. And so they have hybrid days with some time in person with their teachers and sometimes virtual. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Murphy, who will talk you through the high school schedule. We're putting this first this time because, as Mr. Kaur alluded to, we have had some rethinking. We keep looking at the schedules, trying to make them better with every passing day. So we'll take you through that for the high school students who will still be going every day, or not every day, but they will be going in the afternoon. And we will now have the explanation of the 9 through 12 secondary students. I'll turn this over to Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Ms. Scales, and welcome to everybody. And I said it last time, but again, I want to thank our community for all of the support they've given us since always, but certainly since March 13th, that fateful day when we moved out. And we want you to know that we've been working hard to put together our best possible program and schedule for you. 2 different schedules at the high school. One will be the hybrid, which right now represents about 80% of our students' choices and their parents' choices, and then a remote schedule that Ms. Scales will describe to you. And it's really the biggest change from our last presentation is that our students will be meeting live, but every other day. Originally, we had a cohort, we're calling it North and South right now, and that's based on our elementary zones. And we're going to have them 2 days in a row and then switch to the second cohort for 2 days in a row. And we at first thought that might be a good way to keep that instruction going and keep kids engaged. But we had some good feedback, especially we had one particular teacher, Mr. Karcher, who spoke to us, and we shared it with our supervisors and with our superintendent and deputy superintendent. And we decided that we would go every other day. And Mr. Stauffer will be on shortly to explain how that's going to look. But we really think that helps our scope and sequence better. It also helps with the delivery, and it also matches up better with the virtual that you'll see Mr. Stauffer explaining to you shortly. So we're moving along with that. We also want you to know that we are working very hard. We know that your students made choices last spring, whether it was as 8th graders or high school students. And we are very proud of the comprehensive nature of our school and all that we have to offer. We are going to do our darndest, both with our hybrid and with our remote, to give our students the best possible experience. I have to honestly say it won't be exactly the same given what we need to face with the number of sections that we can offer, but we're working very hard to give the utmost when it comes to student choices. You're going to be hearing shortly about also our mitigation from Ms. Fox, as well as extracurricular activities from Ms. Sheeler. And they're already going on right now. Even over the summer, our students are involved with their advisors. And you'll hear about our welcome back activities. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Spofford, and thank you all for joining us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you on September 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Hi, everybody. I'd like to go through the high school schedule with you. For those of you that saw it last week, there are a couple changes on here, as Mr. Murphy mentioned. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'll kind of go through it quickly, so hopefully you can understand it. The gray box would be the high school times. So as you can see, there's 4 virtual periods in the morning. for half an hour each, and there's 4 live periods in the afternoon. The live periods are only for half of our school. So the school is split in half. And to the right of that, you can see we added how the split will happen. So the north will be Bout Hills, Forts Ferry, and Latham Ridge. These are the elementary school zones that you currently live in. So the north is Bout Hills, Forts Ferry, and Latham Ridge. The south is Loudonville, Southgate, Blue Creek, Manans, and our out-of-district students. And the 8-day schedule at the bottom illustrates when you would be virtual and when you would be live and what periods you would have. So as you can see, day 1, for an example, would start with period 8A, and then 5A, 6A, 7A, and then live, and that's for all students. Live is 1, 2, 3, 4A, and that is only for the North students. And then the next day, as you can notice, 8B, 5B, 6B, 7B. The reason we have the A's and the B's is for classes that meet every other day, such as phys ed, some support programs, reading, stuff like that. So out of that 8-day schedule, the students will have a virtual lesson every other day, and they will have a live lesson every other day with 4 of their classes. Next slide, please. We also, this is kind of in the early stages, but we came up with the virtual only plan just in case there is some sort of closure. And there would be 4 classes a day, so 4 hours of instruction a day. So we hope there are not any closures, but we do want to be prepared just in case. So that's what our virtual only plan looks like. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Fox, who is the LaFollette Hall principal. I do want to give a quick shout out to my nephews, Marcus and Joshua at Latham Ridge. Go Bison.
Thank you, Mr. Spofford. I'm just going to highlight a couple of safety measures specific to the high school. Obviously, you've heard about many of the safety measures that are in place district-wide. At the high school, we do plan to use 3 entrances, both for arrival and dismissal time. Upon arrival, students will report directly to their period 1 class, which is a change. If you've had students come to the high school in prior years, they had the option of being in the cafeteria and they would go to a homeroom. In order to help with the social distancing, we will have students report directly to their period 1 class. Bathroom occupancy will be limited and supervised in terms of how many students are in and out of the bathrooms. Our ideal would be to have 1 student in, 1 student out. So we will have adults that will be monitoring that. Another significant change for us this year will be that students will not be assigned lockers. Our lockers are extremely close together, which would cluster large numbers of students. So for that reason, students will be allowed to use their backpacks. As I believe was already mentioned, we will be cleaning and disinfecting during the hour between when the junior high school students exit the building and the high school students arrive. So custodians will be assigned to specific areas to make sure that that can happen. We'll also be using physical guides, such as tape on the floors or sidewalks. We'll have signs up. We will be a little bit more directive this year about mapping routes for students to get from classes or halls to the next hall. We most definitely will be also encouraging them to use outside pathways, meaning our courtyards, which they really like to do. So those are just some specific measures that we will be implementing at the high school. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about remote learning. Ms. Fields.
Thank you. So Mr. Spofford showed you earlier a schedule for remote learning if there is a district closure. That would be similar to what happened this past March. Suddenly the whole district has to close and everybody is now in remote learning. However, as you see on this slide, parents have an option, and you saw that in the survey results. You may choose to not participate in the hybrid model that we're offering, and you may choose to opt for remote learning for your students in 9th through 12th grade. If you choose to do that, there are just a few reminders we want to share with you. When you make that choice, you're opting into remote learning for the full semester. The semester ends on January 29th, 2021. That is so that we can keep the cohorts separated, and we can also plan for social distancing. If we have a lot of students coming in and out, we won't be able to maintain the safety and the social distancing that are a hallmark of our plan. Our students will be instructed by certified North Colony teachers. This is not putting them on a computer program. These are our teachers who will be teaching. Our class sizes in person will be limited to 15 students by the 6-foot social distancing rule and the typical size of classrooms. They will be at 15 in a typical size classroom. In remote school, so to speak, since students are at home, we won't have to limit the classes to 15. So they will match our class size guidelines that we had back when we were in school before the pandemic, which is typically between 25 and 30 students per class. Students will be following the same schedule as their peers, so they would have some classes in the morning and some classes again in the afternoon. The only difference is they would be doing all of their classwork via the computer as opposed to coming into school for that half day. Instruction will be live for the majority of scheduled classes. So we know that it was hard in the spring with emergency remote learning. It was hard for students if videos were posted and they couldn't ask questions. It was hard if they just had assignments posted. So this will allow us to use a platform such as this or Google Meet for the teacher to do what we're doing right now and actually talk with and interact with the students and build that classroom community. All elective classes may not necessarily be able to be offered with this option. Some electives may be taught through asynchronous learning, which means it was taped in advance and your child would watch it on demand at a time that was convenient. That is an issue with staffing and scheduling. So as Mr. Murphy alluded to earlier, typically in the spring, you and your child select the courses that you want to take, and we build the schedule around knowing how many students want this class and how many students want that class. Now we're holding on building the schedule until we see who wants in-person learning, and we'll build your schedule, who wants remote learning, and we'll build your schedule. So depending on the numbers and the fact that we have a static number of staff, we will have to make those assignments. It is always the case as part of the scheduling process. You usually don't see it because it's happening in June and July, that our administrators who make the schedule and our administrators who are in charge of certain programs meet. Sometimes some classes, for whatever reason, just don't get enrolled at a very high level. So it might be that there's an elective out there that only 4 students registered for. Last June, that could have happened. And then we think about, okay, how can we combine courses? What can we do? We are going through that process right now. And so I know a question that I'm getting frequently, and I know Mr. Murphy is also getting it, is will class X or class Y be offered if my child is remote? And I know this is a really unsatisfying answer, but we don't know that yet. We, as Mr. Kaur said, we are exploring all options possible to make as many, as wide a range of courses available to all of our students, but we have to see where the numbers are and where we can staff those courses and the ways that we can staff those courses. At the end of our very long meeting today, we landed on a good new idea. So we continue to work to make this better, and we will continue to have information on this. But this is probably the one piece that is evolving in real time, because as survey results come in, we are building schedules around that. Welcome week is a very exciting moment. I think I'm turning this over to Mr. Kuchar.
You know it, Ms. Skills. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Awesome.
Yes, Welcome Week is our new thing for this year. Normally we do a new student orientation. However, this year, because we're not able to meet you all in person, despite how excited we are to meet you and introduce you to the school and welcome you to the Bison family, we're going to be doing a whole week of activities for your families. So parents, students, guardians, everybody. We are going to be hosting a virtual tour Our student government came in and sort of showed us all the ins and outs of the high school for you, all the halls, where the classes are going to be, everything from where the entrances are going to be to where they're going to take their PE classes, and all the halls and what classes they'll be taking in those halls. So that's going to be made available Wednesday, September 2nd through this YouTube channel. The next day, Thursday, September 3rd, we're going to be having 2 Q&A forums. So the first one is completely student-led. There will be either a counselor or a school administrator in there, but it's going to be 3 students, upperclassmen students, who will be giving a small presentation to your sons and daughters about Shaker High School, and they'll be available to answer any questions that they may have, and that'll be via Zoom. And it'll be a great opportunity for them to ask questions. In the afternoon, or sorry, in the evening rather, Mrs. Fox, the hall principal for 9th and 10th graders, myself, and Mr. Murphy will be having the same thing, but for the parents. So we'll be putting on a small presentation through Zoom, and there'll be an opportunity for the parents to ask questions that they may have. The following day, our student government is going to be hosting a bunch of small drop-in sessions through Zoom based on interests. So we'll have a couple students that'll be available to talk athletics, a couple students that'll be available to talk extracurriculars, a couple students that'll be there to talk academics or music or art or anything like that based on what your interest may be. So they can jump in, they can ask a small question or a very pointed question, and they can leave. And those schedules are all going to be sent out to you, and Zoom links will be sent out to both you and your children before this happens. And then we're going to wrap up Welcome Week Friday night with a trivia game that student government is putting together, a little Shaker trivia, so we can test the knowledge of the students and see what they've learned over the course of Welcome Week. And again, that will be via Zoom as well. So we've had a lot of success with that during the closure. So a week's worth of stuff to welcome you and your families to Shaker High School. As we say every day, it's a great day to be at Bison. We mean it, we live it, we love it. So we hope that you can take part in all of those things. Thank you so much. And I'm passing it on to the 7th and 8th grade administrators.
So now we'll look at our 7th and 8th grade students who will be, again, housed at Shaker High School, but they'll be there in the morning. So we will talk a little bit about their school day. And I think I'm handing this off to Mr. Chamberlain.
Yeah, going backwards from 12 down is a little bit confusing for me, but I'm trying to stay with it. I think I got it. So
Good
thank
job.
you. So students, again, at the junior high have a choice with their families to choose the hybrid model, where you're in person or you have a choice to be in remote. As Ms. Skeels referenced, the bus and parent drop-off will begin at 7:10, but it is a crossover drop-off model that Ms. Skeels explained, so that we're not dropping the same times as the buses. The building is going to be divided into wings so that our junior high will be in close proximity to the other people that are generally in their halls. Students will have classes taught through the hybrid model, with some courses during being in person in the morning, and then there's in the AM session, and then there's a PM session that will be virtual, with a gap in the middle that I'll show you in a minute, where there's time to travel and get home and have lunch, because that's important. Grab and go breakfast will be available to students, as well as grab and go lunch, where students will have their lunch and they can bring it home in their bags and then eat it when they get home. And as we've already noted, this first day of school will be Monday, September. So this is an example of a one student schedule. And I think if you see it's a day in the life of a 7th grader, this is both for, and I'll explain more about in a minute. This is both the in-person as well as the remote schedule. So if a student were at home, they'd be following this same schedule. So if you can see, you have block 1, which includes grabbing breakfast when students come in. It's a little longer block. Students would be, let's say this student is in a group A, and don't get too confused by the groups, because you have one student and they're going to be in a group. What essentially it is it's half of a class. So that's 15 students is in group A. There's another half that's in group B that you can't see here. But on day 1, when group A is in English, the other half is in math, like you can see on group 2. And they basically flip-flop for the core classes, which really is a more of a scheduling thing than anything families need to know. So for a student, you have English, social studies. We have block 3, where you have access performing groups. It's also a period where students could get resource, or English has a new language support. And then in block 4, 3 out of the 4 days, if you look across laterally on block 4, it's usually it should be world language. Sorry, that's something that should have been corrected, my fault. That should be world language 3 out of those 4 days, with a study hall or ENL or resource only 1 of those 4 days. So 3 out of the 4 days should be a world language course. Then in block 5, you have technology or family and consumer science or art. And then there's a travel block where students will travel home on the bus or being picked up, have lunch, and then the virtual afternoon starts at 12:40. You can see that there's blocks 6, 7, 8, and 9 in the afternoon. And in that, students really should only have 3 classes within an extra class, within the last class being extra help. I think we can go to the next one, Ms. Skills. Thank you. So what are the specific safety measures? So we know we've talked district-wide about the safety measures, but what about for 7-8? So as we've already stated, parents will complete an attestation form prior to students coming to school. The bus drop will take place at the high school. The parent drop-off is going to be at our junior high school with monitors there, ensuring students are safely social distancing and making sure students safely get across to the high school. Students will also use 3 entrances, just as the high school administrators mentioned. Students, again, will be supervised socially distanced as they enter the building. They're going to go directly to period 1, and masks will be worn by all students and staff. Students will be with their small group cohort, and core teachers will move around for the classes, with the exception for the world language. Students will move as a cohort to a world language class, or family and consumer science, art, or tech. Those classes will be held at the high school in larger spaces. Students will generally remain with their cohorts, but they may join a different cohort. So there'll be 2 groups of 15 potentially in a larger space, but spaced out. Additional safety measures. As I just mentioned, they're going to be cohorts would combine for world language classes. We'll have signage in the hallways, as Ms. Fox already noted, working on directional movement for students, as well as additional adults in the hallway to support students in staying socially distanced. We're not using lockers this year. Belongings will remain with students as they move. Bathroom occupancy will be limited, and also will be supervised for social distancing. And we'll have, as we'll have across the district, hand sanitizing and our cleaning supplies will be ready available throughout the building. Next slide. Oh, okay, so transition supports. We will be doing a virtual tour of Shaker High School and the specific spaces that we're going to be using for our 7-8 program. That's going to be available on the district website Tuesday, September 1st. We'll also send out a messenger to let all families know. We're also going to have a question and answer forum for 7th and 8th grade families, that's students and parents, that will be held on Tuesday, September 8th at 6 o'clock on Zoom. You'll get an invite to that as well. And our orientations programs, just like we've done in the past at Shaker Junior High School, the first week of school is really going to be, we're going to be moving slow and talking about all of those orientation-like things, because it's really important that kids become comfortable with their new environment. We'll set up organizational structures, as we noted that when we sent home the supply list yesterday. So those are things we've done before, and those are things I think that we can do pretty well. So remote learning for 7-8, as I think I mentioned earlier, it's really going to follow the same schedule. So students will have the same morning classes. So parents, you guys can opt for the hybrid or the in-person model. If you opt for it, or either way, you're committing for a semester that ends July 29th. And we're going to use our certified teachers, as Ms. Skill noted earlier, and students will be in remote classes with students from all of the junior high. That's one of the features that's a little different. You may not be in a hall. You will likely be with peers from across the school. Class sizes are going to remain within the district general guidelines that we have with our traditional school when we're in person. And as I said, students are going to follow the same schedule as their peers who will be in school will follow, where you have a morning session, a large break in the middle of the day, and then an afternoon session. And these classes will be live synchronous instruction. There may be a few examples of times where we find it valuable to have asynchronous instruction, for example, like physical education, where you might be asked to do something physical, where it's if you're in person, it's somewhat limiting to that activity. So we have some ideas about how we might be doing some stuff like that. I want to pass it on to Ms. Debbie Keogh to talk about special area instruction.
Thank you, Davis. Regarding junior high school, that we will still have the same general music program that we've had before, with just a small exception. Our units will be the history of rock and roll, musicals, and guitar, but we won't be sharing instruments from class to class. We have plans to clean them in between uses or to rotate which class is using them on a given days. For band, chorus, orchestra in the junior high school level, we have some thoughts to spread the sections out a little thinner, where we usually have an A day chorus, a B day chorus. We'll kind of check out whether it's possible or advisable, whether we need to look at a third day or split an orchestra or something like that. And we're using large rooms, so we still have social distancing in all of those. Band, chorus, orchestra, I've been asked, what does it look like? What do we think it'll look like? It'll look like orchestra. But on a given day, with only half of the students in attendance, that big orchestra is already reduced in half. We'll use a large space, we'll spread out. Orchestra is considered safe at 6 feet distance per New York State guidance and the CDC, and chorus and band, wind instruments are considered safe at 12 feet distance, and we have plans to spread the children out in larger spaces for that. Regarding performances, it is easier for us to say now that there will be no December concerts. We're not planning for fall performances, but I can't tell you past that really what to predict. I think it's just a wait and see. We'll be patient and see what happens past the winter. I shared in this next slide, I wanted to pull in something from current research just to give families an idea of what is being considered safe right now. This is not anything I created. I added the words and the arrows just to show people, but this is from an international consortium of performing arts associations that has commissioned a massive research study on aerosols related to performing arts in COVID-19. The preliminary results on this are very encouraging. So like I said, I shared this just to show some examples. This is a measurement of aerosol particles with singing. The APS at the top is an aerosol particle spectrometer, something that means a lot if you are a researcher in this field and not so much to a musician like me. But you can see the two very tall spikes. When someone is singing, a professional soprano, there are a lot of aerosols leaving her mouth, say, with classical singing or a pop song. But the little tiny bump next to it is singing with a mask. It makes a gigantic difference. And I wanted to show that to you so families could feel some reassurance about what we are doing. Everything that we're planning in the music department in the whole district will meet or exceed all guidelines from the Department of Health, State Education Department, NISMA, and examples like this in current research. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, the art supervisor, Mrs. Ann Manzella.
Mrs. Keogh, there is a question on music about remote students, students remote in music. How can remote middle schoolers participate in music and art? I know we are still working through that process.
There are some aspects of the music program, especially at the high school level, that are hard to predict. A small class like music technology or advanced placement music theory, if only one student out of 18 is virtual, I guess I can't answer right now what would happen. That's different. But for a large ensemble band, chorus, orchestra, from when they start to when they graduate, the entire district program, it is fair to assume right now that some students who choose the virtual option could still be involved somehow in a virtual band, chorus, orchestra experience. It won't look the same. It won't feel like orchestra. It might feel like a Zoom music lesson. But I think we could answer that. And they could also assume that there would be probably enough students to have a general music class.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would echo similarly from a remote standpoint in visual arts, that we were able to do such wonderful things in the spring related to critiques and work that students were able to create at home with materials we were able to provide, as well as a number of reactions, responses to contemporary artists and the like, that I would see and experience remote or in person being equally enriching for our children. The slide here related to Art 7, 8, and 9, 12 basically outlined for you that our general visual art and design lessons this year in grades 7 and 8 are still going to continue to reinforce the development of our foundational skills and our content that continue right along in our scaffold through the years, primarily focusing on observational drawing, color theory, and composition in those 2 middle grade levels. We plan to individualize use of materials and supplies, preparing what we can in kits and minimizing shared items that we plan to clean, and hopefully provide use of disposable gloves in instances where there might be some type of equipment that from class to class we'd like to see used again. But in general, we are looking to prioritize single-use oriented supplies. So in any way that we can do that, that is how we are looking to address those matters in the art room. Grades 9 through 12, really throughout our program, but specifically, we focus on the artistic processes that are outlined in our new state standards for visual and media arts. And those involve creating, presenting, responding, and connecting. And much of what we do involves making. There's no doubt about the making that happens within art, but there's also a lot that students learn about how things are presented, how they are composed and laid out. And they also do a lot of inquiry-based responding to what artists create and how culture is responding to what is happening in the world. So all these connections and experiences are ripe in the art experience. At the high school, we're very pleased to be able to continue to offer a broad range of our electives, and we also have been refining how to offer exhibition opportunities, especially with some work that we did in the spring, so we would look to continue that. I think career and tech ed is what we'll hear from next, if Mr. Phillips, I think, might be on the call.
I will be taking this, but thank you, Ms. Manzola. This includes the disciplines of business, family and consumer science, known as FACS, technology, and engineering education. So we are looking to offer all courses in a variety of formats. That could be remote, it could be in person, it could be also asynchronous learning. So when we're looking at that, as we said, instruction will be virtual and in person. We will work at maintaining our career exploration internship program. That will be virtual. We're looking for mentors, so if anyone is on the call and would be interested in becoming a mentor in this program, you are welcome to contact Mr. Eric Phillips, the supervisor of this program, and we will maintain social distancing in here, and small classes, of course, will be operative in these disciplines just as they are in all others. Mr. Stein.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaur. So for our 7th and 8th grade physical education program, our students will receive it once live and once virtual in a 4-day rotation. For our 9th through 12th graders, and an 8-day rotation, they'll receive 1 live physical education class and 2 virtual classes. We'll be grouping our students differently at the high school this year with physical education. Instead of by elective, they will be grouped by hall. So 9th and 10th graders will be together, and 11th, 12th graders will be together. Just as we are avoiding locker use throughout the building, the same will be the case for our PE lockers. So the students will not be changing this year. We're going to ask that they come prepared with athletic attire the days that they do have live PE. But of course, bathrooms will be available as needed, just no locker room use. our two major areas for our secondary physical education for instruction are going to be our gymnasium still and our outdoor areas. One thing that's a little bit different when it comes to physical activity is that if you are going to engage in vigorous activity, those are such things where we're elevating the heart rate, that 12 feet minimum social distancing is required. So we're going to be really looking at some creative ways to maintain that distancing, such as using some painted lines outdoors in some grid areas where students know they're safely being active at a good distance from others. In our gyms, utilizing some gym floor paint and lines that we can put down that are temporary. Again, that will be 12 feet. But parents and students should know that if we ever do have a situation with a physical education class where 12 feet cannot be achieved, then we will move to non-vigorous activity, and students will maintain wearing their masks when we cannot have 12 foot of social distancing. But with 12 or more, with vigorous activity, they will be able to remove their masks. As far as equipment goes, equipment will not be shared among students within the same class, and equipment will not be used again until it's disinfected from class to class. One of the creative ways that we can work around this simply in a live 4 or 5 period day, each period may be engaging in completely different activities. So the equipment may only get used by one class that day, and then we have the chance to disinfect it before students come back the next day. So we've looked at a lot of creative ways to make that work with our equipment and remaining safe. And just as we've always done in the past, we will have sections that are devoted to adaptive physical education with some great activities that are going to be safe and appropriate for those students as well.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Sheeler, and I am one of the administrative deans at Shaker High School. I'm going to cover our plans for extracurricular activities for our 7th through 12th graders in North Colony. So this is not any new information. So people who were present last week, I apologize, but for our new guests tonight, this is important in terms of your students' participation in our extracurricular activities. So we want to mention that we do believe extracurricular activities to be a very important part of our students' experience in North Colony. So we are going to try our best to continue with what we can offer in this hybrid and remote situation that we find ourselves in. So right now, we're asking our advisors to meet with their student leaders and officers to come up with a plan of how they can successfully continue their work in this model. And we've had several clubs already submit those plans and approve. So that's great news that we have such active students and advisors already. So unfortunately, I will mention that some of these clubs and extracurriculars will not be able to continue because they're not conducive to this platform. And those advisors will get in touch with their current members and kind of talk about next steps when we hopefully return to our normal school schedule. Ms. Gills, if you could go to the next slide, please. I do want to mention that, I mean, we're talking a lot about schedules and use of the high school building and where our junior high and high school students will be. So I want to emphasize that we will be clearing the building at 4 p.m. Students, faculty, and staff are expected to get on a school bus or get a ride immediately after school so we can keep our protocols and also prepare the school building well for the next day. So clubs and activities that are approved will take place outside of that academic time period. So that would be post 4 p.m. Or perhaps on the weekend. It's just going to be a different time schedule than you might expect during a normal school year. And a big extracurricular, obviously, are interscholastic sports. They are still slated to begin on September 21st. That is a statewide decision by our NISFA, our interscholastic state entity. There are some fallback plans if that September 21st date is no longer valid, and any information that we get or any updates will be readily communicated with our families and with our students. So I would just say that in this interesting time we're in, and with these many plans that we have, if you're looking for a positive way for your student to maintain a connection with their peers and with a faculty member, that paying attention to what is available in terms of extracurriculars as we begin the school year. There will be a lot of promotion of those, because it is something that we want students to continue with even in this format. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it off, I believe, to an elementary colleague of mine. I'm not sure who's here, but I think we're going to do K3.
That would be
Thank you,
Mr. Pini.
Sheeler.
Yep.
I just want to add to what Mrs. Sheeler just said, and it's something that Mr. Kuchar said earlier. If you have a student in grades 7 through 12, I can't say enough about the clubs and activities that we are fortunate enough to be able to offer in this district. You saw what student government is providing as their welcome week back. They are fun, they are social, they are a time to really have kids grow and explore and meet new friends. So I encourage you to keep an eye on these. Even though they're virtual, our kids have a way of making everything pretty awesome. They never fail to inspire me. So thank you for that, Mrs. Sheeler.
No problem, thank you.
So we are going to K3 now. Elementary students in the K3 grades will be in their home elementary schools. And tonight we are fortunate to have Mr. Pini, who is our elementary principal at Blue Creek Elementary, to talk about the elementary program. So I will turn it over to Mr. Pini now.
Good evening, everyone. So we do have two different start times for different elementary schools. Forts Ferry and Southgate will be the early schools, and they will start at 8:45 in the morning. Buses will start dropping off around 8:30 and will go till about 2:15 in the afternoon. Blue Creek, Bout Hills, Latham Ridge, and Loudonville will be the late schools. We will start at 9:45 with buses beginning to drop off around 9:30 and go till 3:15. Students will have their special areas classes of art, music, PE, library. We also will have our Colony Youth Center providing before and after care options for all 6 elementary buildings. At this point, we are planning on having our first day of school be Monday, September 14th. So we are going to cohort our students, meaning that we're going to have the kids basically only be around the same 14 other kids in a given day. We will have our special areas classes. So the art teacher, for instance, will go into the classroom and meet with the students in their homerooms. The students will also eat lunch with their cohort group in their classrooms. And they will go outside and have mask breaks with their cohort, that same group of students. And we'll also have recess activities with the peers in their cohort. Families are encouraged to send their kids with reusable or disposable face masks, especially at the elementary level. Our beautiful little elementary kids grabbing and touching their face masks, maybe even chewing on it for a while. It'll be really helpful to have an extra mask in the backpack or two. We also will have some personal protective equipment for students who do not have them. We will be able to supply those, but a lot of times the kids will have a preference probably about which mask feels most comfortable to them, and it's best to have that on hand. They will be expected to wear their masks throughout the day, in addition to not in place of social distancing. So it's sort of a double protection. We'll keep the kids 6 feet apart, but also having that mask on the whole time will reduce potential infection. So their student desks the elementary classrooms will look a little bit different. We will have our desk space 6 feet apart. We will also be posting some signage to be reminders to kids about what 6 feet looks like, and also signage to make sure that kids are sort of following the directions of the hallway. They're not walking down the middle and having kids walk the opposite way. The kids will not travel much around the building. They'll basically enter their homeroom at the beginning of the day and probably not leave unless they're going outside. And many of our classrooms have outside doors, so that will be even more convenient, but they will not be doing a lot of traveling. Each building will take steps to reduce the density of students at arrival and dismissals. We can't give a lot of information about that at this general meeting. All of our buildings have different layouts and different ways in and out of the building. So you'll hear more about that from the building principals in the near future. Also, lunches will be delivered to the classroom, so the kids won't be going to the lunchroom to pick those up. They'll be brought right to the classrooms where the kids will be eating. So hand hygiene and mask breaks. Students will have several times built into the day for hand washing. And we want to make sure they're doing it well. We will include this before and after snack and lunch, before and after PE or any outdoor activity. This will, if you have watched little kids wash their hands, this will be a time-consuming thing, but it will be really important. And if you have an elementary age child, please preset them that they'll need to wash their hands regularly. It'll be more than they're used to probably, and the presetting will be helpful. There will also be automatic hand sanitizer dispensers within each classroom, and students will be able to use those as well. But generally speaking, we will be having kids wash their hands with soap and water most of the time during the day. Teachers will schedule a mask and movement break several times probably throughout the day. And they'll figure out when the best time is. And that may change week to week. So the first week of school, kids may be really tired of wearing the mask. They might go out earlier and take a mask break and be outside. And the teacher will have some discretion as to when to do that. The mask breaks, we will try to get the kids outside as much as possible this year. So if it starts to get chilly, please make sure that they have the appropriate clothing to go outside. It is probably the healthiest place for us to take our mask breaks, and we'll stay 6 feet away from each other. Arrival and dismissal, as I mentioned, it will be very building dependent. So depending on whether or not parents can drop off at the same time as buses, we're lucky enough to have that at Blue Creek. Some buildings, just the layout of the parking lot and the traffic patterns, it just will be different at each school. So again, the principals will be defining those and staggering arrival and dismissal time, and other strategies to make sure that we don't have groups of kids kind of congregating or trying to get into a door at the same time. The elementary principals will be informing parents in the near future about what dates we'll be having for us to kind of lay out the plans that we have thus far, hear questions, and another date to go over kind of where things are and how we've resolved some of these concerns. So you'll be looking for 2 different meetings in the upcoming weeks. Breakfast, lunch, and snacks. All classrooms will be tree nut and peanut free. So that means any products that contain nuts will not be allowed in the classrooms. I've had some parents reach out to me already with concerns about their children being kind of picky in their eating, and that it will be difficult, but it will be very difficult for us to staff and also keep kids in cohorts if we're pulling kids out of the classroom to eat. So it is going to be a tree nut and peanut free classroom. Meals will be served and eaten in the classroom, and students will be supervised. So this, again, we'll have them sitting at their desks, having their meals there. Breakfast will also be available. Our lunch period will be 30 minutes, and meal purchases and payment will be contact free. So this will all be done digitally this year. Snack time will probably not be on any schedule that you get from the building principal, but it will be at the teacher's discretion. So for instance, at Blue Creek, one of our classes will eat lunch, I think at 11 a.m. We're probably not having a morning snack. It might be in the afternoon. So it'll be at the teacher's discretion based on probably when their lunchtime is and when there's a natural break in activity. Bathrooms will be sanitized throughout the day. Bathroom placement and configurations will vary from building to building. And also the bathroom procedures will be discussed at the building parent meetings. As we spread out cohorts of kids, as we're trying to have fewer than 15 students in a class, we are sometimes going to need to be using classrooms that, or where we normally would have bathrooms at a classroom for a certain age group. They may be moved to a different part of the building principals, and we will make sure that the bathroom trips are well supervised. So that is not something, so even if the bathroom isn't in the classroom, we will make sure that there's great adult supervision when students are using those restrooms. So this is just a sample schedule. We've kind of been playing around with what a day would look like. It is shorter than school days in typical years, but we're still able to get in all of our content areas and make sure that we have a staggered lunchtime so that our cafeteria staff is able to get those lunches to classrooms and special areas classes. Special areas classes will be a half an hour, with the exception of art. We're looking at doing it 45 minutes. But generally speaking, each day the child will have, each classroom will have a special areas class that's about a half an hour. You'll see an IE block. That is a time when teachers will be giving students what they need. There might be a group of some students that could use some challenge work, and other students that might need to have parts of a lesson retaught. This is also a time where students who get resource room would likely be working with their resource room teacher, but it's a time that we are not doing new instruction, so that students who get pulled out for any services or have any services push into the classroom will be able to do that without missing anything.
Thank you, Ms. Trapani, for that. That was very comprehensive. And now our 4 through 6 elementary students will be housed in Shaker Junior High School. And I believe Mr. Chamberlain is going to do a double feature tonight and come back and talk a little bit about our grades 4 through 6 students who will be housed in the junior high school.
Thanks, Mr. Pina and Ms. Gills. So as we said, our 4 through 6 students will be in elementary zones within the junior high school. So students will obviously be attending Shaker Junior High School, but still it's an extension of their elementary experience. So we've been able to divide the wings into building into 6 different independent zones. The building will operate on 2 different schedules, with Forts Ferry and Southgate being what we traditionally would have referred to as early schools, 8:45 to 2, with Blue Creek, Bout Hills, Latham Ridge, and Loudonville being 9:45 to 3. Students will have all their special area classes, art, library, music, and PE. We're also adding, there's not going to be double 2 sessions of music. There's going to be 1 session of music, 1 session of art, 1 library, 1 PE, and then 2 PEs, and an enrichment class, which will be taught by one of our technology teachers. CYC is currently planning before and after care options for our elementary students who will be at the junior high school. And the first day of school, as we've said, is going to be Monday, September 14th. So this is just a little snippet of what a schedule will look like. Obviously, you can see the 2 different sides because there are early schools and late schools. So the left-hand side is for Southgate and Forts Ferry. And if you're a family that is from Blue Creek, Bout Hills, Loudonville, or Latham Ridge, you're on the right-hand side. So just going down the schedule, just looking at the basic components of the schedule, it's similar to any of our elementary schedules, where we're obviously going to have a drop-off period, where we mentioned earlier, where parents are dropping off, and then the buses drop off, trying to minimize commingling, just because it just gets a little more messy than is good. And then there's a home base period in the morning, where students will go to their home base class. And then you'll have something like, again, not every schedule will be the same because they're staggered based on providing specials to students. So in this situation, you'll have English language arts first, then there's a little break, then you have your specials class, lunch will be in the class, and then you have a recess break. Let me just talk a minute about that recess and break. We're looking at all of our spaces, mainly outside. We have courtyards, we have outside spaces, and we're looking to schedule those spaces in conjunction with our physical education classes so that everyone can maximize the outside space use. We have a bunch of new facilities outside. We have a new little basketball court. There's a baseball field out back. I think we will have some opportunities for that. And then in the afternoon, we get back to the schedule. We have social studies and science, math, and then we have the dismissal process. It's the same for both Southgate and Forts Ferry and Blue Creek, Bow Hills, Loudonville, and Latham Ridge. We're looking at having, actually, why don't you go to the next slide, Ms. Skills? Sorry. So what are the specific safety measures in the 4-6 building? Students are only going to enter and exit through their assigned school doors. So we have 6 school doors, and we are looking to have a person stationed at each of those doors that will be assigned for that school. Students are going to remain with their cohort throughout the entire day, but that cohort may travel to out for a break, a mass break, out to the courtyard or outside, or for a recess, but they'll still be traveling as a cohort and staying within that cohort. The teachers are who rotates in this model at the 4-6 level. Both special area teachers as well as core teachers in departmentalized grades, which is often 5th, 5th grade, and 6th grade. We have dedicated student restrooms within each of our 6 dedicated elementary zones. They're not going to leave their zone to get lunch. There are 2 school zones that are connected to the lunchroom. If we are working on a modified way, we're meeting with our food service folks so that those students may be able to walk through a modified line to be able to pick up their lunch, obviously without, if we can do it in a completely as safe as possible way as if it was just dropped off. If we can't do that, then we won't do that. That's an option as well. So those are 2 things we're working on. 4th grade classes are generally going to be placed in what are our new science rooms because those have sinks, trying to maximize opportunities for our youngest students to be able to most easily wash their hands. Emergency drills. We will be having modified emergency drills. I'm thinking we're going to have these at all of our buildings. In terms of a lockdown or a fire drill, I think with students being in smaller groups, not in halls, I think that's something, personally as administrator, I'm less worried about that because oftentimes the most challenging pieces in emergency and lockdown pieces are when kids are in large groups. And in our models, that's not something we're really looking at. So I think that's going to be something that should go pretty smoothly. And I'm going to need you all to keep an eye out for a detailed pickup and drop off plan that we're working on. We're going to be doing some dry runs on because at the junior high, specifically with the 4 building drop off and really the 4 building pickup is going to be where it's going to be really a challenge. And I'm going to need everybody's help. We're all going to need everybody's help to do this well and efficiently and safely. And I'm thinking I'm passing it back to Ms. Debbie Keogh again. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding K through 6, they still will have general music classes. They will not share instruments. We're not going to pass any drums around or anything else, but we still will have plenty of opera sticks or shakers or something similar that they would just keep in their desk. They're the only child who will ever use it, and they'll keep it at the end of the year to bring home to make noise for you. And we'll use a digital software platform that we have to have students allow them opportunities to make music. So I think it'll still feel like a music class. In 4th grade, we postponed instrument selection in the spring, and we will start that right away in September. We're excited to introduce instruments to all of our 4th graders. 5th and 6th grade chorus will not meet this fall. We just don't have any way to gather 85 students or something close to that in a socially distanced environment, especially with the guidance being 12 feet apart to sing. So that is something that we've postponed. We will revisit and rethink in the spring. Band and orchestra, somewhat similarly, we're going to just start with the music lessons piece, and we'll gather students for rehearsals to be determined at some point, given that we need to figure out space usage in the building and what will work best. We aren't, like the secondary level, we aren't planning any performances for the fall. It's just far too soon to predict anything for the spring. As far as performances, I would just leave that question alone for now. But we still believe it's so important for our kids to have opportunities. And so we are planning to see what opportunities will be available to us to do some virtual performance as possible and as we think we can do over the year. On instruments and safety, like I mentioned earlier, we meet or exceed every guideline from the Department of Health, State Ed, and all current research. So my child will be involved in band and chorus in the district, like yours may be, and I'm very comfortable with that process right now. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Ann Manzella, our district art supervisor.
Thank you. We are in the process of getting our mobile teaching stations all ready to go for our elementary population. We, as I mentioned at the secondary level, are also looking to individualize supplies that we're using in whatever way that we can. And at the elementary level specifically, we're looking to maximize the use of classroom supplies that students typically would have at their own desk station. These would include things like scissors and glue sticks, crayons, markers, colored pencils, erasers, a ruler, things that normally would be a part of their classroom kit of how they operate and use those materials for all types of disciplines and content that they are involved with. But in addition to that, sometimes if we have items that we'd like to expose students to, individualize those or have sets prepared for the day that could be wiped and prepared for then another day's use. As mentioned before, we will also use disposable gloves where possible, and at the elementary level, we will look to forego smocks as just one more thing that we wouldn't want to have interfering with the time that we have with students in terms of getting right to our lessons. As I mentioned before, the artistic processes that we focus on in the delivery of our content really do feature ways for students to develop creative problem-solving skills and learn independent thinking and self-expression. So we look very specifically to offer students opportunities to develop their fundamental skills. These could include drawing and building in the way of sculpting, but also really learning to understand the world around them through art. So we would continue to do much of the same that we do in our RICH program already, just in some new ways. I believe physical education is up next to give you some information about the elementary program.
Thanks, Ms. Manzella. So for our K-6 physical education program in person, they'll be meeting 2 times in a 6-day rotation. Just like with our secondary, outdoor is going to be a major teaching station for us, but what's a little bit different is our indoor teaching station for our elementary students will be in the classroom, as mentioned. The teacher will travel to the room. So when we are in the classroom, we know that 6-foot social distancing is really going to be the maximum that we'll be able to achieve. So for the times that we do have to participate through physical education in the classroom, the activities would be non-vigorous because we would need our students to keep their masks on during that time. But when we are able to get outside, which I want to let parents know that we are going to try to do as often as possible. So we'll keep make sure you keep in mind, the weather, that if it's on the cooler side, we want our students to dress warm, because if it's dry and if it's not too cold, we want to get outside. And when we are outside, just as mentioned before, that we will be using some markers and markings so our students can have 12 feet of social distance. And that'll allow us to participate in vigorous activity. It'll also allow our students to remove their masks during those vigorous activities. And we will have very clear markings and using lines so the students really know, especially for our youngest students, what their boundaries are and where they're able to move safely and not come into an area with another student, and still respect appropriate spacing. And as I mentioned before, the goal will always be to get outside for our activities. So please keep that in mind when you send your young ones in for school.
Okay, so I want to share, as Mr. Chamberlain shared for 7 and 8, and I shared earlier for 9 through 12, that there's also an option for parents who would like to have remote learning for their students in grades K through 6. So some similar things apply. First, it is for the semester, so that ends on January 29th. Our students will be instructed by a North Colony elementary teacher. Our students who are in remote classes will have classmates from all 6 elementary buildings. So we won't have remote school per building, but we'll have a remote, think of it as like the 7th elementary school. It is the remote elementary school, but you might have a few kids from each of the buildings in your 1st grade class, for example. Our class sizes will be based on our pre-COVID class size guidelines. So that means our class size maximum for K is 23 and it's 30 in grade 6. So they will not be the 15 that you'll have in person because of social distancing rules needing not to apply. They will have a day that is comparable to their peers. And by that, we mean they will have the same kinds of experiences as their peers. They will have live instruction, so that will be different than it was back in the spring. So they will have a teacher who is teaching them in real time. However, some special area classes may need to be offered via asynchronous instruction. So that means that it might be that there is an art time scheduled and the students may log in at that point with the assistance of their classroom teacher and have a lesson that has been previously recorded by an art teacher or music or any of the special areas. We're still working through that. If you are in remote classes as a student, you still have access to food service, counseling services, the entire array of wraparound services that we provide in the district. So the biggest question is, what will it look like, right? Like, so if my child is going to be at home, what can I expect as a parent? So first of all, teachers will be providing live instruction, but there will also be times when students are working on activities that were assigned by the teacher. So we don't expect your child will be like this for 6 hours in a day on a computer. We know that is not good for children. So there will be a combination. Parents will be able to check their children's progress without having to go to the Google Classroom. So I want to show you a new feature that we didn't have in the spring. And this will help in case we do end up in a situation where there's a full district closure. Each grade will have, and this is an example from Bout Hills, will have a website. So you don't have to get into your child's Google Classroom, which means you don't have to know their login and their passwords. This is just a website that would be accessible to you. And something you'll notice right away is on the home page. So when you land on this, if your child's in grade 3 at Bout Hills, you will see the work that your child is going to complete for the day. So you can look and say, okay, my child had to do 2 math videos, a basketball rounding sheet, they had to listen to a story, etc. So you don't have to actually go to this teacher's page. These are just sample names, so don't worry if these don't look like your 3rd grade Bout Hills teachers. They're not. We just made a sample for you. So you will see this, and then your child instead would be going to the Google Classroom like they have been taught to do. So if they go to the Google Classroom, what we'll have is something that looks very similar. So there'll be a nice opening page that says, welcome to the grade 3. Today is Monday, September 14th. It'll show the students an overview. Look at how similar this looks to what you saw on the home page. And then what this will be, so if a teacher is teaching live for 20 minutes and then a student has to practice, we'll have everything in one spot for them. We can't assume that you have everything at home. Now, you may have some things at home, and that's terrific. But if not, we'll have videos here, we'll have lessons here, we'll even have optional practice. So let's say your child is really fast at math and they get through the 20 minutes really fast. Well, here's some extra practice they can do. So this will be arranged in a way that you can look through. Here's the rounding sheet. Your child will be able to do this right on the computer and follow the directions and move the right basketballs over into the square as they follow directions. Next, we're going to go to reading. Here's a story that they're going to listen to. The video would be embedded. The questions are right here, so your child can fill this out right in this slide, and we'll be able to submit at the end. Here's some social studies work. So the idea is that we will have this very well organized. So yes, it's true, the teacher will be teaching and talking about all kinds of social studies concepts, but then when it's time for your child to apply, there will be activities that are related to that standard that was just taught. And these videos are created by our teachers and selected by our teachers. And the questions are also done by our teachers. So we have really high quality content. And then, because we're always trying to help our children to be independent, you'll notice that this is exactly what you saw on the website homepage. So this is a chance for your child to say, yes, okay, I did watch both the videos I was told to do. I did complete the basketball. I did listen to the Be Kind. So what you're seeing when you look at the landing page is actually just a duplicate of what we're trying to teach your child to do. So it is kind of our version of a digital planner. We know a lot of you look at the planner at the end of the day. This will get it in one place for you. If your child's in an upper grade where they are departmentalized, instead of having the teachers' names, over here it'll say math, ELA, science, social studies, and you'll be able to see all the homework. So it will be, I think, more streamlined for our parents, and you will be able to access it again from your computer if you're in the other room working from home, or if you are working at your job and you need to look and see what your child's work is for that day. We also like this because it promotes the conversation you can have with your child. Hey, did you have trouble with that rounding worksheet? Talk to me about that. You'll have a good picture of what your child is doing without having to sit in the website and going in the Google Classroom with your child. This should make it much easier and much quicker for you as a parent. So what might it look like? The one big difference you're going to see is we don't expect that a child can sit for an hour online lesson. So if you have a kindergartner at home, we don't expect that they're going to be in an ELA block from 9 to 10. We know what that 5-year-old is going to look like, 30 minutes into that session. So we're going to start with a morning meeting and community building. We know that's a really big piece. If your child is at home, we want this to be, it could be a read aloud, it could be a puzzle of the day, it could be social emotional learning, but just to help build a sense of community with your online remote classmates. Then when we get to ELA for K through 3, we'll have 20 minutes live direct instruction, followed by guided independent practice. The teachers will use this in different ways. They may take a small group here and have another group work on the slides I just showed you so that they can get some time with all of the students. Then we'll give them a special. We are blocking PE and art together, a break because everybody needs a good stretch break. Math will be the same thing, 20 minutes live, followed by guided independent practice. Then music and library block together, and then a lunch break. And then we come back for science and social studies, a brain break, a video with some movement for just getting up and getting active. And then at 1:15, we have another 45 minutes for the teacher to decide, okay, there's some extension activities. Today I need a little bit more time on science, or a little bit more math, or I want to meet with a small group. I'm going to give everybody independent practice. This is where our highly trained teachers will utilize this time that best meets the needs of the students in the class. We'll have a closing circle activity. We cannot forget about the social emotional needs of our kids. I know we're worried about academics, but we also have had kids who've been home since March. We have to build intentional time into the schedule to take care of them in their social emotional needs as well as their academic needs. And then school's dismissed at 2:15. 4 through 6 is almost identical, except we've made the academic blocks a little bit longer. You'll see that the ELA block is now an hour, mirroring what their classmates would be doing in person school. 30 minutes live instruction with guided practice, music and library, a break. Same thing with math, 30 minutes, followed by practice, PE or art, lunch and break. Science and social studies, brain break. And then at the end of the day, this will be a little bit different. We call this a rotation period. So it may be that the teacher is doing some learning activities on a certain day, extension activities, independent practice. If your child's in 6th grade, it may be a chance for them to do some world language practice. It may be a chance for them to view some health lessons. It may be a chance for them to have some orchestra or band lessons, or it may be a chance for enrichment. So this period won't look the same every day, but it will be tailored by the teacher and scheduled. And then a 3 o'clock dismissal time. As our principals have referenced, Mr. Feeney referenced this, our K through 6 elementary principals will be scheduling community meetings. They will be via Zoom. They will be building specific. We are planning the schedule right now. We will carefully plan so that dates don't overlap. So we don't want you to be having to choose between 2 meetings. If you have multiple children, we will schedule those very carefully so we don't end up in that situation. We're also going to have some student orientation sessions, just like Mr. Chamberlain talked about the 7th and 8th graders needing to get to learn the high school building. Well, our kids in 4 through 6 need to get to know the junior high building. It's a pretty awesome building. As you know, it's part of our building project. It's new and there are a lot of exciting spaces. So we will have those sessions prior to school starting on September 14th. And we will be sending those information sessions out to you with invitations both from our elementary principals and our communications team.
And Ms. Skeels, on those informational sessions for 4 through 6, Mr. Chamberlain and the elementary principals will be working on planning those sessions, correct?
Correct. So before we get to questions, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Core to talk to you about what is coming up next. We know we haven't answered all your questions tonight. We know this is an evolving situation with the pandemic, and we are responding to a lot of things in real time, but we have a great part of our plan done, and Mr. Core will now tell you our next steps.
So I think, I go back to bullet 1, and bullet 1 is aptly entitled The Balancing Act. And it is a balancing act. The balancing act is determined by basically by the guidelines and parameters of social distancing, which impacts our physical facilities and how many human beings we can accommodate in a building at one time, in one classroom. And that has a huge impact. The survey, now we know right now that 80% of our families are choosing either in-person or a hybrid form, 20% are choosing fully remote. That quite honestly is a little better than, if we look at it, a little more than we expected for people choosing either in-person or hybrid. And so we're going to have to take a look at that. We're going to have to make adjustments with that. We currently have received results, some of the results from a faculty survey to determine the request for accommodations as outlined by state and federal legislation. We're working through that process. Ultimately, the outcome of that process, coupled with the results from our survey, will be major determinants in terms of how we offer our programming and to what extent we can offer that programming. So it is an ongoing process. We need to be flexible. We need to adopt and adapt along the way. And we will be communicating with you as we go throughout this process and notifying you if there are any changes in programming or in the options that we are offering. We shared on Friday the email in the survey. We're asking you to complete it as soon as possible. You've been excellent in doing that. We're requesting that our survey for learning options be due in by next Monday, that is August 24th. We've already mentioned building-based informational meetings and orientations. We will be putting out information on that as those dates become solidified. And there will be pupil services, and that would be focusing on special education and mental health. And that will be a meeting at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night, Wednesday. And that is the focus there. Student schedules and teacher assignments. As there are so many variables that are out there that have to be rectified, and as essentially we are constructing an entire new school, or in some cases schools, within a matter of weeks and days, student schedules and teacher assignments will not be available until the week of September 7th. We know this is much later than you're used to getting them, but we are really going to need this time to determine how that will be sorted out.
We now have some questions. These are different questions than we had last Thursday. These are new questions that have come in since that last one. And Mr. Core, do you want to take the health and safety questions?
All right, so the first question is, will a staff member be ensuring that attestations are completed for each student before they get on the bus and enter the building each day? That attestation will have to be completed by the parent. So, I mean, we are looking for that to be done prior to the student entering the building, and then using the app to verify that, or having another paper process that will occur before a student enters the building. So we are in the process of solidifying those details of that procedure. But we are working on having that done so that the student has it done and it's known before the student enters the building. Manual daily temperature checks will not be conducted by the school, but they should be conducted at home prior to the student leaving for school. And that applies to staff as well. So staff should self-administer a temperature check. For children who are old enough to do that, they can do that. But certainly we are going to require that those temperature checks be done by a parent on a student prior to that student leaving for school. And that will be part of the attestation process. Yes, there will be disciplinary action for those who are not following proper mask wearing and social distancing. So that is the insubordination is in our code of conduct right now, and we will follow the processes and procedures for discipline with regard to those individuals, those students who refuse to wear a mask. We will be cleaning in between sessions. So if middle and high school students are in the same classrooms on the same day, does the school plan to clean and disinfect the rooms in between? And the answer is yes. We will be planning to clean those rooms in between. What happens if one sibling in the family has a fever or develops a fever at school? Will other siblings be asked to stay home? So I'm assuming here that this person is symptomatic. Okay, there has not been a diagnosed COVID-19 case here. So at that time, if the other siblings are asymptomatic and there has not been a diagnosis of COVID-19, then there is no need to identify them as direct contacts. If there is a symptom and if there is a positive test, and a sibling has been diagnosed positively for COVID-19, then we would assume that the other siblings and the members of the immediate household would constitute direct contacts, and they would be asked to test and to quarantine by the Department of Health.
So there are some learning option questions, so I can share the answers to these. So if my child needs to miss school due to a COVID exposure, what would the plan be for his or her continued learning? So if there's a COVID exposure, and let's say your child has to go out for a 2-week quarantine, that is why we are building the consistent platform for the online instruction. We are prioritizing standards. It's called essential learning. It's something that New York State is helping us with, so that we will be able to have your child be able to participate in remote learning for the time of the quarantine so that they don't lose too much ground. I understand that remote learners will be taught by a certified North Colony teacher. However, will it be a teacher familiar with the grade they are teaching? So all of our teachers will be certified. So if we're looking at elementary teachers, K-6, they have a K-6 certification. We will be working. It may not be the grade that the teacher was teaching or the class that the teacher was teaching this previous year, but we are starting by having it be either that teacher who just taught it last year or somebody who has taught it previously, so that they are familiar with the learning standards and they are familiar with the expectations for that course. Will accelerated courses be offered if my student is remote? So this, I think, a little bit depends on the grade level. So this is a little bit harder to answer, but depending on the grade level, we are looking to offer as many courses as possible when students are in remote instruction. So if they are an 8th grader who might be taking algebra, we are working right now on our plan to ensure that we can have students successfully access all courses that are available in our catalog. As Mr. Court just described, that is part of what we are working on right now as we balance the student numbers and the faculty numbers. Will the remote instruction and in-person instruction work in conjunction? So if my child switches from remote to in-person or in-person to remote, will they be learning the same things? So the first thing we have to say is this: if your child starts in person and it is not working for you or your family, you may move out to remote instruction at any time. However, the converse is not true. If you start your child in remote instruction, that commitment is that you are staying in remote instruction until January. And you can reevaluate at that point at the end of the first semester, which is the end of January. They will be aligned. We are working very hard right now because we know we have to prioritize the standards because of the loss of time in person since March. When will we have the daily schedule for online classes? Sadly, that's probably going to be the same time that Mr. Kaur just explained. It will be after the first week of September as we finalize all these details. We want to take as much time as we can to get this as right as we can. And so we are going to continue to perfect until the point at which we have to put those schedules out. Is the district offering remote learning until June 2021? So you have the option to reevaluate your circumstances at the end of January, but we will be offering remote instruction until the end of June unless there's some major cure of this pandemic somewhere in between, which I don't think we expect. So we will be offering remote for the full year if that is the option you choose for your child and your family. Mr. Deneen is going to answer our elementary school questions. He's been working closely with our elementary principal, so I'm going to toss it to Mr. Brian Deneen, our Director of Teaching and Learning.
So the first question asks about remote learning and K-3 outlining 20 minutes of direct instruction followed by independent work time. What is my child supposed to do if they work faster than the allotted time? Well, that's part of the positive change in having the dynamic where they will be working with their teacher. So I think it was Ms. Skills earlier when showing the website showed that one of the things we are able to do is to provide work or challenge so that students to a degree can move at a pace that works best for them. But as always the case, whether it's online, frankly, or in a classroom, the teacher will be having to work in both large groups and small groups to try to work with that student to see where they are and what do they need. What everybody wants is to be efficient and effective. And that's the hard part, but it's also the art of teaching. What is library class going to look like? Well, it was mentioned earlier, the special areas will be going into our classrooms. Our librarians can teach very effectively with the same technology in a general ed classroom as they do in their library. So whether the topic would be author study or digital citizenship, those are lessons that very much will take place when they're in a 15 student cohort in second grade or sixth grade. That will continue. The question about borrowing books, that's a little trickier. We certainly are not starting the year with book exchange as we know it. As I think everyone on the call can imagine, safety is first. And we have to kind of learn more and look at our practices. But here's the good news. Our librarians were forward thinking in the spring. And what we did do is choose to invest our department money in ebooks and options. So the good news is, although there's nothing like getting that hardcover book, especially when you're a kindergartner and a first grader, out of the library to bring home and read in your own house, we will have options where the students will be able to read ebooks, take out and look for their favorite copies, and the librarians will work with teachers to make that happen. So that's an exciting change, and frankly, for years to come, that will be more a part of our lives. And how can they learn library skills in the classroom? Like I alluded to earlier, the same lessons that our librarians teach in their libraries, we can teach in classrooms. We love our libraries, but we also need that space, and that'll be part of what we're using all of our space for in elementary schools and having cohorts in all of those spaces. But the skills themselves, they'll translate when the librarian walks in the room. And lastly, will children K-6 be expected to travel to and from? So the principals and I are going to talk more about this. Here's what I know. I don't think we can envision that your 5, 6, and 7-year-olds in our primary grades are asked to carry a computer back and forth every day. With that said, we also want to be best prepared should we find ourselves like we did in March, where we think, are we going to come back tomorrow? That's one of those tough calls. So certainly our primary learners, we'd look for computers to stay in the classroom. Our intermediate learners, that may be more a case of where we do bring them back like we have in 5th and 6th grade. And I guess we'll always be looking out to try to read the tea leaves should we believe there could be a close down or a switch to remote. But if the worst case scenario is the primary learner's computer is in the classroom and school switches to remote, we'll figure out a way to have a pickup just like we did for about 500 computers in the spring. So,
and Mr. Dineen, I'd like to take some time right now. So we will be K-12 in Chromebooks. We have Ms. Scriven, Ms. Julie Scriven on this call as well. Ms. Scriven, do you want to talk about Chromebooks, one-to-one, K-12, and Chromebook pickup?
Sure. This week, we're actually doing a Chromebook pickup for grades 3 through 5. So we were already planning to give out new Chromebooks to our grade 5 this year, and we're also going to give some brand new ones out to grade 4, and those will stay with them for the next 4 years. So if you borrowed a loaner Chromebook over the COVID period, we'll want you to come and pick up your brand new one and turn in the older one. Those we're gonna disinfect, clean, and kind of quarantine for 2 weeks, and they will be repurposed for other grade levels. There'll be another pickup probably at the end of the month for the lower grades.
Thank you, Ms. Scriven. Appreciate that.
I think we're all set on these questions on the screen, Ms. Skills.
All right, our next questions are junior high school questions. So if I have to call in an absence for my 8th grader, would I call the junior high or the high school? We think it's going to be the same number, and Ms. Scriven has done a great job of moving phones from one exchange to the other. So the number that you typically call will be the same number that you call, and Mr. Chamberlain will certainly go over that with you, and we will publicize that. Will students continue in their cohorts during the afternoon virtual sessions? That is a very good question. They will be joined together in the afternoon virtual sessions for certain classes. So we will have the A group that Mr. Chamberlain referenced earlier and the B group together to have some extra support from their teacher in the afternoon. And the 210 to 235 block was described as something similar to after school. Is that portion of the virtual day required, or is that an option for those students that need to connect with the teacher? Great question, whoever thought of this. It is that kind of after school extra help period. I'm going to stay after and meet with my teacher. So it will act very much like an optional after school extra help period where students can check in with teachers, teachers can check in with students, but very much like the 2:30 to 3 o'clock block when we're in our typical school schedule. Great question. So we will make a rotation calendar for you so you know what is an A day or a B day. And you saw tonight that we defined for you and Mr. Spofford showed we are going to do A and B groups by attendance zones for elementary schools. We'll make sure that this is very clearly noted on our district website because we realize this is a big question. And just like we have a 1 through 6 schedule rotation at the elementary level, we'll make it clear what the schedule is so parents are aware and students are aware of what days they are meant to be in person and what days they'll be home. Second question, if my high school student has a mild illness and stays home for a day or two, can he do online learning for those afternoons so as not to fall behind? That's going to be difficult because our teachers won't necessarily have that kind of technology in the room so that the child could just join a classroom. So we would use our typical practices for our teachers working with our students who've been absent to keep them up to date with their schooling. The next one, we talked a lot about this. So people are wondering, why aren't we doing junior high and high school swapped? So there are a lot of high school kids who might have after school jobs, or they might have CEIP, or they need to get home and the day seems late. We thought about it in two ways. First of all, in the morning, there are fewer junior high school students, and that's when a lot of the bus runs are happening, quite frankly. There are more high school students, even when it's only half of the cohort. So for transportation reasons, the junior high school numbers fit better than the high school numbers do in order to get all of our bus runs for all of our early elementary, late elementary, and all of our private schools, which is still our responsibility to provide transportation. We also did think on the other end of it that for families who might have a high school student at home and a student who's in the intermediate grades of 4 through 6, who might not be starting till later, that the high school student could help in the morning and perhaps help put that child on the bus. But transportation also is a big factor in that. For high school students who opted for 100% virtual, will they enroll, participate in technology, science lab, and music lessons? So Mrs. Keogh was working, as she spoke before, about making music lessons viable for our students who are in remote instruction. That's important. We have students who are very committed to our music program. Our science labs will be taught differently this year for all students. Even those in the hybrid model, they will be part of the science class. So whether you are in person for hybrid or you're home in a remote learning, you will have access to your science labs. For technology classes, CTE, we are working through those CTE offerings to find out the best way to make those available for students who are in remote. And that will, again, depend on enrollment, both for the in-person students as well as the remote students. Transportation questions, Mr. Corr?
Yes, will parents who choose to drive their kids be given a specific time frame to drop off? I think that will depend upon school to school. Certainly in the elementary schools, they will be given either a time at the beginning of the arrival dismissal period or at the end of the arrival dismissal period. I think that is dependent on each of the schools. The students in grade 4 through 6 will be given a specific time as well. I know in terms of the 7th and 8th graders at the high school and the 9th through 12 students, it is not a specific time to drop off, but it will be governed by a specific location. And those plans will be made public. I know, Mr. Murphy, do you have anything you want to add to that? Or is there a high school administrator who wants to talk about drop-off locations?
Yeah, Mr. Corr, we've been, we've been talking about having 3 different entrances. And I know working with Ms. Town, we want to have the buses dropping off at the high school and asking the parents to drop off at the junior high school. And based on where the buses are stopping, we're going to ask students to enter into one of those 3 different entrances. We've just ordered signage, and then we'll be sending out that direction to our parents, obviously, before school starts.
The next question I will defer to Ms. Town and our transportation team. But if your child lives at 2 homes in the district, divorced parents, can transportation be provided to and from both homes?
Hi. So unfortunately, we cannot make that accommodation this year. We need to have students that are assigned to busing be riding one bus where each student is guaranteed 1 seat on the bus. And there's a whole host of reasons: social distancing, maximizing space, tracking and tracing. So in this situation, that's something that we can't allow. Also, we can't allow students to have a bus pass to ride home with a friend, or to, go over to their, for a birthday party once a week or something like that.
So, again, we mentioned here that, this is one of the adjustments and the accommodations that we have to make for health and safety reasons, and also due to limitations in terms of resources and busing and the like.
And Mr. Corr, I apologize. You also had a question about the parking for students.
Yeah, I was just going to go to that, Mr. Murphy. So
Oh,
if a
I'm sorry, I
junior,
thought you already asked it.
no, if a junior student receives a parking permit, are they guaranteed a parking spot even though there are no assigned parking spaces for the school year? So, Mr. Murphy, if you want to take that, that's great.
Sure. Mr. Spofford, I've been talking about that, and I actually spoke to a parent about that today on the phone. And we're very confident, because we are going to the north-south, that there will be plenty of parking for our seniors, and that's why we've opened it up to some to our juniors, just because we know some juniors do get their licenses. And quite honestly, this is the first time I've ever said this as principal. We're looking to put less kids on the buses, and if that helps with that, that's why we're encouraging that. So we wouldn't be offering it to all of our seniors and our juniors if we didn't feel that parking was going to exist.
So is it fair to say that if you're in the class of 2021 or 2022, you have some special perks that are positive and are a result of COVID-19? That is a silver lining in this cloudy time.
As long as you have a valid driver's license, Mr. Core.
Yes, that we do require that to drive to school. That is important to know. Thank you.
Mr. Core, could I add a little piece to the other drop-off question earlier for 7-8?
Yes, that would be great.
I just wanted to add, so the 7-8 will be dropped. We're asking parents to drop off in the junior high bus loop. But in the past, we've had 7th and 8th graders be dropped off relatively early. The issue this year would be we really can't have anyone dropped off before 7:10 because we're going directly to classrooms. In the past, we would have students congregate in the larger spaces and have them supervised, and that's really not safe. So if we could ask that people wait until at the earliest the 7:10 drop time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo that for the high school, Mr. Core, before the 12 o'clock start, because we will have teachers in a little bit early, and we're asking our students to go directly to that, again, to cut down on that any crowds in the hallways. So as close to that start time is the best that we can have.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Murphy.
Next, we have some questions for both music and PE. So we'll start with Mrs. Keogh. The first question is, I have children in orchestra. Will they still have some type of lessons if we choose the remote option?
And the answer is yes. It won't look like an orchestra rehearsal in a remote experience. If you've ever tried to sing Happy Birthday over Zoom, there's a delay and it doesn't work. So we can't do virtual orchestra or band or chorus really exactly in that experience. When you watch those videos online, those are pre-recorded. They're not real. But we can do lessons. We can do Zoom lessons for the children who are in the remote only option.
And Mrs. Keogh, since this is both, the next one is for both PE and music, since you're on right now, how would students be graded if they're taking a general music class, but they're remote?
I would just defer to the building administration at each level and say that they'll be graded the same way. So there are different grading specifications for music and special area classes at elementary school versus junior high versus high school, but none will be very different at all, or at all different from the in-school option. And Ms. Keels, I can answer the last one too. If we have students who are virtual 100% and they would like to begin an instrument in 4th grade, the 5th and 6th graders have already been in our program, unless these are new entrants to the district. But if we have 4th graders and they would like to participate, our teachers would very gladly invite them to be a part of our band and orchestra program, and would start lessons in just the same way as the other children.
Thank you, Mrs. Keogh. We do get a lot of music questions, and I think that's just a testament to how strong our program is and how many students want to participate. Mr. Stein, would you assume the same that for PE, whether they're in person or remote, the grading and expectations would be comparable?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Ms. Keogh has said, and the only other piece that I would add with phys ed is that we would be utilizing some participation through the virtual platform, and that can be done in a variety of different ways, both synchronous and asynchronous, with students submitting some things to that showed or demonstrate, how they were able to be active, and some written work that can be sprinkled in there as well. But for the various grade levels, consistent with what's happening now, for sure.
Thank you. Our next questions are just in general. Mr. Core, would you like to take the first one about lunches and the incredible service our food service has provided?
Yeah, and for that one, Ms. Ostrowski's on the line here. So she has done a heroic job in providing over 60,000 meals during the shutdown here. So bullet one, since the shutdown, lunch has been distributed free to families. Will this continue? Will paid lunches start again? What will lunch options look like? Mrs. Ostrowski.
Yes, so the directive from the USDA right now is that all free meals will end on August 31st. Then we will go back to the free, reduced, and paid categories, and they will be for children who are enrolled in the district, whether they are remote or whether they are hybrid or whatever. But they would be for, again, we've been feeding from 18 years and younger, but right now, as of August 31st, it will be for those who are enrolled in the school district and attending either remotely or the hybrid.
And what will lunch options look like?
We're going to go as touchless as possible. Of course, we have to follow the USDA regulations as we have always. So they will contain a meat alternate, fruit, vegetable, bread, grain, and a fluid milk. Right now, we're looking at 2 different options where the kids will, depending on which building they're in and what grade level they're in, that for the most part, they'll either be delivered to classrooms or they would come up and just grab and go and take back to their classrooms. Or if we have remote stations throughout the hallway, the same type of idea where they would come up and they would make their selections and go back to the area that they're assigned to eat. We will also have an online ordering system that the child could order the night before or first thing in the morning, the parents or the child can order. So that way it would help us with numbers. It would help the families, make the selections and know that their child's being taken care of in the way that they want them to, with the meal that they want to have.
Thank you very much. So the second question, is there any chance the schools revert to a more normal environment in the spring with the 4th through 6th graders back at home schools and 7th and 8th graders back to the junior high? So the answer to that question is that depends on where we are in the current pandemic and the current public health crisis. So essentially for that to happen, I think we would have to go to a point here where a vaccine has been developed and it is distributed in a way that we can ensure the safety of each and every child in the school. But that move is solely dependent upon public health telling us that it is safe because of cure or vaccine or whatever has transpired to move back to more normal distancing. So I don't want to be a person who is without hope, but I don't want to build up false hope either. So I think that's the simple factual statement that remains for us to go back to grades 4 through 6 at home schools and 7th and 8th graders back to the junior high school. The last bullet have there been any additional positive cases in the ESY program? And the answer is no.
Mr. Core, I will stop sharing. That's the end of our questions. So we will archive these questions and answers so that on the FAQ page, people could see the questions from last Thursday and those answers this Tuesday. And then we'll have another presentation on Thursday, and we'll continue to archive those questions.
So that concludes our presentation for the evening. Any questions or comments from the Parents Advisory Council? We were at the peak of 400 viewers this evening, and you know, we were at nearly 900 the previous week. So it looks like the word is getting out, and we will continue to move forward. We have our last general town hall session on Thursday evening.
And tomorrow night, Mr. Barden has a session.
That is important to note as well. Yes, Mr. Barden, you do have your session tomorrow night for pupil services, and that includes special education and mental health.
It's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, and we'll touch on special ed and mental health, and the link will go out tomorrow mid-morning sometime.
Thank you, Mr. Barden.
Sure. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank our Parents Advisory Council for their continued participation in this very, very important process. You've put a lot of time in throughout the school year, and especially during the summer. We are very grateful for that. I'm very grateful to the North County administrative team, our instructional and our instructional support administrators for their continued participation, their hard work, their great thinking. I'm very grateful to Ms. Skeels for her leadership in this process. I'm very grateful to our North County Teachers Association for their continued thoughts and input, and you know, especially in terms of helping us along to get a better understanding and to make some very positive changes in the high school schedule. I'm very grateful to the 400 viewers tonight who cared so much to come out and to participate and to learn more about this process. So we know this is a daunting task. We can do hard things. We are in this together. We are a North County community pulling together, working collaboratively, and very grateful for each other during these difficult times. So many thanks to you all. Have
and
a
Mr.
wonderful
Core, can
evening.
we just also have a moment to say thank you to Michaela, who is a high school student who has shown up every week.
Michaela, that is true. That is
sometimes she has
awesome.
other colleagues, but boy, is she representing student government and
You
her
are-
high school
you-
friends
you
well.
are
And she
true
asks
blue.
really hard questions, which make us only better at what we do. So thank you, Michaela.
Thank you
You
for
are-
having me. I'm really glad to be here.
You are true blue, Michaela. You are very, very loyal. You bleed blue, literally. All right. Take care, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.